What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods or in the mountains or remote or rural areas? Episode 2. In order to get back home from a popular kebab restaurant, I need to walk a short path through the woods. Along the way, there is an extremely old abandoned, partially collapsed chapel, and occasionally I'll stand there for a few seconds admiring it. It's quite beautiful in its own way. One day, during the winter season, I decided to rest there for a minute, so I placed my kebab on the bench right next to the chapel and just stood there taking in the scenery. It was already rather dark, and the woods were almost completely silent, but right as I was about to continue my walk, I heard footsteps rapidly getting louder. It was a child running towards me, and as soon as it realized I was there, it started to repeatedly scream, "Run, he is coming," or variations of that same sentiment. I was a bit perplexed by the situation, so I watched the child run past me without moving an inch myself. It didn't take another second for a much weightier pair of footsteps to appear. I could make out a silhouette in the distance, which seemed to be their origin, and at that exact point in time, I got really scared. As opposed to running, I decided to hide in the chapel next to the altar, and after tripping over an old broken chapel bench, I reached my hiding place. The footsteps got louder and louder, but right as they approached the vicinity of the chapel, they suddenly went silent. About 15 seconds of complete quietness had passed just for the words "Oi. You fucking idiot" left your kebab on the bench to break the silence. Turns out it was a resident of the very same street I inhabit. His nephew was visiting, and he wanted to race him to the kebab stand. I don't know whether this was the right place to post this. Ultimately, this is more stupid than creepy. My friend and I were chilling in the woods one day back in high school and saw a dog walking by, later followed by this kid. He looked troubled, so we asked if he needed help. He obliged, telling us he was dog sitting for his friend, and the dog got loose. So we spent a good hour following this dog and kid around, going deeper and deeper into the woods. Eventually, I finally got the dog to come to me, but it wasn't wearing a collar, so I wasn't able to get a hold. My friend and I look away for just a few seconds to discuss strategy, and when we turn back around, the boy and the dog are both gone. It was like they completely vanished. Keep in mind, it was autumn, so any footsteps could be heard from quite afar. But it was just silent. Not a single trace of them anywhere. Still don't really know what happened. Maybe they ran away really quick? Who knows? It was definitely enough to creep us out, though. When I was quite young, so young, I cannot remember this occurring. My father and I went to visit my grandfather. A crotchety old man who hates pretty much everyone and lives in the middle of the woods. At the time, he lived in his first house in the woods. Anyways, my father, grandfather, and I decided to go on a walk. The surrounding foliage. Unfortunately, I had short stubby baby legs and was not quite as fast. However, my father would every so often look behind to see where I was. Well, one time, he turned around and noticed that little toddler, me, had gained a following of about 5 coyotes, who were waiting until my father either stopped checking on me for long enough or I got far enough behind for them to grab me and drag me off into the brush to eat me. So yeah, very nearly got eaten by a pack of coyotes. Watch your small children in the woods. We used to go down to a lake in my area to party. It was beached but only accessible by 4-wheel vehicles, and as teenagers in a small Texas town go, we could get down. One day a single police officer walked down the steep ridge and called us out of it. He was panicked and asked us to leave quickly, as the backup was coming. We thought he was being cool and telling us to drop the beer and leave. Driving out. A whole damn cow was dismembered along the path. Clean cuts. The head was hanging from a tree by a rope you had to get under to get out. It slid across my boyfriend's roof as we were driving. It wasn't there when we showed up only hours earlier. I never went back to that place. We never heard an animal's cries, but someone dismembered a cow at that secret entrance only like 500 yards from us, and we had no fucking idea. Fuck that. I was about 12, and I was heading to the back of our backyard to pick raspberries with my mom and brother. They were already back there, and there's this woodchuck head just lying in the backyard. Now, I knew exactly the woodchuck that this head belonged to. He was a mean sob living under our neighbor's shed. Our neighbors refused to go back there because they were fucking terrified of it, and my brother and I weren't allowed out in the backyard alone cause my parents were also afraid of the giant demon woodchuck. So, I'm walking back to meet my brother and my mom, and there's this giant woodchuck head casually lying in the grass. No blood, no mangled body parts, just the head, and it looked like it had been chewed off by something huge. So, I screamed bloody murder, and my mom and brother came running, and then they started freaking out, and by this time, my dad had come running over. And I just looked at him and said in a horrified voice, if that's how big the head was, how big was the rest of it? And how big was the thing that got it? And my dad was like, I don't even want to know. Okay, everybody, back inside the house we go. The head alone was the size of a small cat. This woodchuck was like a Jurassic era sized woodchuck. And this was a suburb. We didn't have bears or anything. I mean, there was a small wood behind our house, but that was it. Even the neighborhood giant dogs had been afraid of Woodchuckzilla. We never did find out what got it. I was working in a forest in East Africa for a while. It was getting seriously dark, and we were hiking back to the car. The wind was quite strong, but you could still hear some ruffling in the leaves, and as I turned around, I saw something quite big in the shrubs. It was a fucking leopard. I shrieked, and some guy from the group shot into the air to scare the animal away. I am glad he didn't shoot the animal, but was still glad when the animal bolted out of there. I was jogging at night with headphones on in a park with dense trees and bushes. The overgrowth was taking over the path, and it was difficult to see, so I turned the flashlight on my phone on. I started to see a fire burning ahead but couldn't really make it out. I take my glasses off when I jog. As I got closer, there was a clearing, and I saw a big fire raging and no one around. So, I pause a minute and fish my glasses out and find out that yes, there are 6 people standing there actually. Perfectly spaced apart from each other, and they all turned at the same time to look at me. I turned 180 and sprinted the fuck out of there. The path I jog on at night is nice and bright because the city of Winnipeg uses those LED street lights now. The wooded area leads to a small area called Don Gary Park, where I get to a bench and take a minute to reflect on my day and my goals for tomorrow. Also, the bench I rest at is right beside this police launch dock for the Red River. I have never not felt safe there. My friends and I have speculated that the 6 dudes I saw were probably police just blowing off steam on a quiet night. This was quite a few years ago now. But me and my friend had this really cool spot to hang out in the woods. You had to walk in the middle of a creek for a kilometer and duck through sharp bushes and thistles. The hike was well rewarding, though. The spot was about half an acre big. It was pure green grass on an incline with beautiful clear water ponds everywhere. There was tons of wildlife, and the butterflies lived there. So, there were always tons of butterflies. So, the story begins on the way to this place. My friend Levi and I were walking along the river on the way to the spot. It was in the middle of a valley, and nobody else ever went down there. Suddenly, Levi stopped moving and ducked into a bush. I did the same because I thought there must have been a large animal somewhere. I saw him staring up the hill, and so I looked up too. There were 2 people standing at the top of the hill, heaving back and forth a lifeless body. We watched as they threw the lifeless corpse down the hill as it bounced off the trees and eventually got stuck on a tree at the bottom. Then they took off. Me and him were terrified, and I was shaking so badly I couldn't speak. So, we decided to verify it was a real body. Levi got about 4 feet away before screaming, "It has nostrils. It's real. Run." So, of course, we take off running, and I glance back to see the 2 people run back to the top of the hill. Me and him ran 2 kilometers, through thick brush and trees to get away from them. The next day we were with his parents driving to town. And we saw like 10 fire trucks at the school closest to the forest. Terrified, we told his parents, bawling our eyes out, worried that we were going to get murdered. His mom started laughing at us and said, "They are training for search and rescue." That was a dummy that the firemen had to find. I never slept as good as I did that night. This is probably less scary than a lot of the other posts, but I was pretty sure I was going to be the nameless victim at the start of a horror movie to show how dangerous the monster is. Basically, my dad and I were walking through the woods when we came across a young moose leg lying on the ground. It looked like it had been violently torn off with no sign of the rest of the moose anywhere. It was fresh with blood still on the wound, probably no more than a couple hours old. My dad is a pretty skilled hunter, so he handed me the axe that he was carrying and told me to watch for wolves while he started looking for tracks. After a little bit, he came back saying, "That's weird, normally if it was wolves, you'd be able to find paw prints, but I can't see any. Also, no bear prints, so I have no idea what killed this." And so, I'm like, "You didn't find any tracks at all?" And his very reassuring response was, "Well, I did find what appears to be the mama moose tracks headed this way," showing me the tracks. You can see how her stride is a lot longer here. Whatever killed her baby, she didn't want to fight it. She just took off running. He then pulled out his bear spray and held it at the ready as we kept walking deeper into the woods with the UN-named non-track leaving predator armed with bear spray and an axe. In Auburn, Alabama, in 2008. It was Halloween, and we Googled haunted houses. I can't remember what the website was like or if there even was one, but it was like 45 minutes away. I know that it wasn't like a big attraction, and we figured it was on someone's land and would be like a local deal. We drove out there at like 10 p.m. This was before iPhone and GPS, so we had MapQuest directions. We ended up going down a pretty country road for a while with no streetlights, then turned down a legit dirt road that went through the woods. Pitch black. Went down it for like 10 minutes and finally saw an old house with a sign by the driveway that was handwritten and said, "Haunted house." No other cars or lights or people anywhere. We pulled in the driveway and sat there for a second like, alright, this is fucked up. We should leave. All of a sudden, an old pickup truck turned on about 15 feet in front of us, facing us, lights shining right in our faces. It started driving towards us, down their own driveway. We backed out and peeled out. It followed us, like almost bumping our rear end. Right on our tail down this pitch black dirt road in the middle of the Alabama woods. We were flipping our shit. It was Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Hills Have Eyes stuff. He stayed out our tail blinding us and almost bumping us all the way back home until we got off our exit, and he finally let us go. No idea who was driving. I always think about what would have happened if we got out of the car when we were in that driveway. In a patch of trees off of a field near where I keep my horse, there's one of those big oil drums sealed up with a very heavy boulder on top. The only way it could have got there is being placed by a tractor or some sort of heavy lifting equipment. My partner and I tried to push it off, but no luck. I don't know why, but it creeps me out every time I see it. I regularly walk my dogs past it to see if they show any interest, but honestly, after watching them look for a toy that was clearly in my lap, I'm not sure I have much faith in them anymore. Thanks to everyone who commented. Y'all made me realize that it could be something a bit creepier than I first thought, so I've reported it to 101. The officer I spoke to didn't sound particularly interested, but at least I know it's out of my hands, and I don't have to live with the guilt if something is found. I intended on getting up there myself yesterday to have a look, but I had a pretty brutal physio session that left me pretty much incapacitated for the day. I'm off up tonight after work, so hopefully, if the police haven't got there before me, I might still be able to take some pictures for everyone. I thought my better half had taken a photo of it before, but I can't seem to find it on her phone. Anyway, thanks again guys, for putting the fear in me and making me do the right thing. When I was a kid, I used to live on a tiny property in the woods. My house was basically built around where stables were once. My room was, back when it was still stables, where the hay was stocked. Before getting to the creepy thing, I need to say some other stuff. When you were in my room, you could sometimes smell hay out of nowhere. My dog was always refusing to go upstairs because something was scaring the shit out of it there. You could sometimes hear knocking on doors. There were 3 entrance doors in my house, sometimes all at once. Now that this has been said, we can go to the fun thing. So, my room had a big ass window that gave a big view over the woods, and my garden was basically a clearing. Once, I fucking heard a kid giggling from upstairs. I ran there only to find my window open, and something running out in the woods. I spent 2 more years in this house and fucking felt insecure the whole time. For those who think kids were pranking me, I highly doubt that any kid would survive such a fall from my room into the garden plus private property. The only entrance has a big ass portal that is inconvenient to climb. I was in a large, wooded area near my boyfriend's home, with him hanging out nearly at midnight. We had gone in pretty deep, and it required a good amount of climbing. The closest path was maybe 5 to 7 minutes climbing down, so it was highly unlikely someone could be at that spot, that time of the night, besides us. As we were kissing and stuff, he thought he saw a shadow move 20 to 25 feet to the left of us, climbing, but it stopped suddenly when my boyfriend looked at it. He told me to be wary, and that exact moment we saw a dark figure climbing a little up but diagonally, like he tried to go directly above where we were. We didn't move and watch him till he closed the horizontal gap and was directly above us, maybe 15 feet of steep downhill thick forest. Then he began to come towards us. Without skipping a bit, my boyfriend grabbed my hand, and we almost ran downhill till the path. We made it in less than 2 minutes while still holding hands and listening to the man running behind us. We ran as fast as we could down the path and out of the forest where there was a cafe and some basketball and tennis courts next to the wooded hill, and of course, people. As we realized we came really close to being mugged or worse, we vowed never to go there at night again. Not sure if this is the kind of story you're looking for, but it's a fun one to tell, so here you go. I used to work in low-income home weatherization, basically giving free shit away to help lower electricity and gas bills and make the home more comfortable to people who really needed it, installing doors and insulation and so forth. One step in qualifying a home is testing combustion appliances to make sure they're not emitting carbon monoxide into the living space, because if they are and we seal up the house, we could kill the whole family. During a pre-inspection of a home on the outskirts of the city, I asked to see the owner's water heater. He tells me that it's in the basement, which is fairly normal, and I tell him I have to inspect it before work can start. So, he goes into the kitchen and starts moving the refrigerator. Turns out the entry into the basement is underneath carpeting beneath the fridge. I should note that I went and did thousands of homes over the years and had never seen such a thing. But, whatever needs to be done regardless, and so I pull out my flashlight and shine it down the stairs, to check out the layout but really to look for black widow spiders because fuck black widows. At this point, I notice a dead cat, mostly down to a skeleton. Not my favorite sight, but really common in crawl spaces and basements. I take a few steps down the stairs and continue my spider check and notice another couple of small animal skeletons. At this point, I start to worry about gas, or poisons, or something equally dangerous, and start looking closer. There are animal skeletons everywhere, at least 10 on a cursory look. Some of them are so degraded I can't determine what they used to be. I also happen to notice that this guy is waiting at the entrance a little too quietly, with his hand on the door. Something clicks in my brain, and I get this immense sense of danger. I'm about 4 steps from the door being clear to close, I have no partner on the job with me, there's death all around me, and I realize just how hidden the entrance to the basement really was. I noped the fuck out, told the guy I needed extra tools and would be back, and marked the job as non-feasible for health and safety as I was driving away. I would have no idea if I was actually in any danger. It could have been completely innocent, but I still remember the adrenaline rush and sense of doom, and sometimes you just don't take chances. I'm getting asked frequently if I reported this guy to the police, and there's a lot of concern about the dead animals. I did not file a formal report, mainly because nothing I saw was entirely out of the ordinary. Crawl spaces and basements have venting at the base of the house, and it's really common for animals to squeeze in and then not be able to get back out. If you have space under your house, there's a decent chance something has died down there. You get used to it when your job takes you down there frequently. Now, this was an extreme case, and clearly, everything put together raised concern enough for me to get the fuck out. But the sad fact of working with low-income families is that you see how lousy their lives can be. You learn not to do anything to make their lives any harder, and I took a lot of pride from the fact that my job made their lives just a bit better. I didn't think that my being scared for a minute was enough to involve the police, you know.